Man, what an episode of Game of Thrones that was. Absolutely mental, and what a way to start the episode. That was crazy. So carrying on from basically the last episode where we had this huge battle, we start the episode and we now finally find out what happened with Jaime and Bronn. So Bronn manages to save him from Drogon actually killing him, and he pulls him to shore. And basically what we see with these characters is that they kind of just trying to recuperate after what happens, and it's just fierce, just the whole way that this thing seems to be playing out, with Bronn basically saying to Jaime that you won't die until you pay me my money or you get me what's mine. And he's pretty much just telling him that, but he's also letting him know that the game's slightly changed. The war is a war that they're not going to be able to win, and I think Jaime's starting to realise that himself in this episode, which is quite crazy. And he says that he needs to report back to Cersei exactly what's happened. We see Tyrion, and in this episode he looks kind of broken. It's the first time I've seen Tyrion where he's not like a character who hasn't seen war before, but this kind of feels like he's looking at it from a perspective that he is the hand, and he's not terribly impressed with what Dany's doing with her power and her right as queen. And nothing shows that more than what happens a couple of scenes later, where we see the Tarleys and we see Daenerys, and basically she just looks fierce, and she's got Drogon with her in the back, and it just looks ferocious. The way she is with the character, the way she is in general, she just seems like such a different character from the one that we've seen traveling to Westeros. And then you have the Defiance basically, and Defiance can only be met with death in this world, and it costs the two Tarleys their lives as Drogon burns them alive in quite a vicious scene. You just see the characters just get burned alive. It's a horrible scene, and it's like a warning to everybody of her intent, and it's quite a scary one because she's exhibiting traits of the Mad King. So that's really crazy to see as well. I don't know I don't know where it's going to go, what's going to happen with her, but that kind of love that you have for the character at the start is starting to change. Your feelings towards her, at least my feelings towards her, seem to be changing, and I'm not sure what I'm meant to feel now, because we've had this character who we've been watching and who we've been getting on with, and suddenly she's just becoming this really horrible character, and it's not nice to watch. And then you've got this scene where you're just seeing the embers, or the flames if you will, of these two characters who she's just had her dragon just burn alive. There's nothing cool about ruling with fear, and that's kind of what it is, especially where you see a scene where Drogon literally roars at the soldiers and all of them just sort of cower in fear and bend the knee. That's not love, that's fear. And she seems like if she's going to be on the Iron Throne, she'll rule by fear, and that's not a good thing. And you see Tyrion gives the look that he understands, and maybe him being the hand and the advisor isn't all it's cracked up to be. There's not a lot that he's going to be able to do. He needs to be able to advise her, and she's not willing to listen to him. He chooses to ask to spare Dickon's life, and she just doesn't respond to him. She just rules with fear, and it's not a nice look. But I do want to see where they take the character, what arc they bring to her. But at the moment, I'm just not impressed with what they're doing with her character. Maybe something will change, I don't know. But she goes back to where she is, her home, where Jon Snow is, and there's a really touching scene that happens here where Drogon maybe feels some kinship, the fact that the blood that runs in his veins is also the same blood that runs in hers. And there's a really nice scene where he allows Jon Snow to touch him, and it's a really nice scene. You see the fact that Jon is actually able to touch him, and Drogon seems to respond to that. And then you have the look of Daenerys where she's looking like, at first, has he ate him? And Jon also looks in wonderment as well, which is quite crazy. He looks at Drogon as such this big, powerful creature like he is. And also like an acknowledgement. Maybe it's respect, I don't know. There's a lot to kind of figure out in this episode, and a lot of things that seem to be happening. There's a couple of moving pieces. Could it be that Jon ends up owning one of the dragons himself in the upcoming war? Maybe he rides one, maybe he becomes a dragon rider. That would be really cool to see. And the fact that we know that he can at least talk to them, well, not talk to them, that's not what I really want to say. The fact that they allow him to touch them, or Drogon in this case, is a big thing, massive thing. I don't think any other character would let him do that. Maybe it's the Targaryen blood. And as I say, Daenerys seems to respond to this. She seems to have grown very fond of Jon Snow in this season since their initial meeting. At first she was cold and distant, but she seems to be warming to him. And a lot of people out there seem to be shipping these characters, not realizing that they're actually family. But when has that ever stopped Game of Thrones? Jaime and Cersei? Yeah. So maybe these two may get together, who knows? But it's not a bad pairing, it's just a bit different, you know. Fire and ice, that's what most people are saying, so that'll be interesting to see. There is some touching scenes where they talk to each other and they have exchanges, and she refers to them again as her babies, and Jon's like, well, they're just creatures, and she gives him such a dirty scowl, which is really funny. But, you know, largely there seems to be a mutual respect between the two characters, the Queen and the King of the North. That's kind of what we've got going on there. And then Ser Jorah seems to come back as well, having been cured. Now he's returned to Daenerys, which is great, where they have a reunion. And in this episode there seems to be a hell of a lot of reunions, but it's not a bad thing. Again, it's good to see these characters obviously come back together and kind of just do that thing where they show their love for each other. And he absolutely adores this character, with Jon Snow just looking on. And it's really good because obviously now he's healed, he'll again do anything he can. He went to go and obviously find the cure. He's now found the cure, and she's happy to bring him back into the fold, which is really cool as well. There's a really cool scene where Bran is using ravens to spy on the Night King and to see where he's moving with the army of the dead. But then we see that the Night King also exhibits the same powers that Bran can use. So maybe there'll be some sort of psychic war between the two characters. I don't know, but it's really exciting to know that he can also feel the presence of Bran as well, and the three-eyed raven. And he's just like, no, you're not messing with me. You're not spying on me. And basically just literally stops that in a heartbeat, causing Bran to literally return to his own body, which is really cool as well. Then we go to the Maesters. The Maesters seem to be still arguing and talking about amongst themselves about the upcoming war and whether they believe in what's actually happening, with Samwell obviously trying to explain that there's bigger things afoot. The war's coming and you need to tell everyone about it. You guys have the power to explain everything that seems to be happening, but you won't do it. For whatever reason, they don't seem to believe it. They don't like the idea of magic, so they're kind of washing their hands of it. Anything that Bran's obviously sent them to obviously explain what's happening, they're not interested in. And this kind of leads to Sam's frustration in the episode. And also there's a scene that comes up where they explain that it was Sam's family, his father and his brother, who were murdered at the start of the episode by Daenerys, and that's never mentioned to him. So we don't know when he'll find out, but at some point no doubt he will learn of his family's death, and that will be interesting to see how he handles that, and kind of how he looks at Daenerys after she's the one who burned his family alive. So that's pretty interesting to look at. Also, what happened in this, we're starting to see these Starks. These Starks are really interesting in this season, and again, it's just the way that they're changing, the way that they are as a family. They've been through so much on their own, and it's interesting to see them all have to come back together, and the kind of different experiences that they've all had are kind of changing the way they all are, and interlinking as well. That's another thing, because Arya's come back and she's back in Winterfell, and you've got Sansa there, and Sansa seems to be scheming, and Arya seems to be watching all of this stuff play out. There's a scene where everybody's on about Jon and she doesn't really pay any attention. She seems like she's becoming very, very scheming. She's horrible. I don't know what's happened to her. The way it's kind of been with Sansa's a weird one. In the early stuff, I didn't really like her. I thought she was just a wayward child who just wanted everything her own way. She wanted all the nice things, as Arya says in this episode, and that's kind of how I saw her. And then she changed, then she grew, and then we began to like her. What's happening with this, she seems to want to be the queen, and that is evident from the outset. Whether she's going to work with Littlefinger or not, I don't know, but there's just the way, it's just the way that it plays out with her and Arya, and they just have this talk, and they talk to each other about what seems to be happening and what it is that Sansa actually wants. And the look that Sansa gives back to Arya and Arya gives to Sansa, it's like, I understand, I get what's going on here. Do you actually understand what you want? Do you want Jon dead? Do you want it all for yourself? And Sansa's coming to the realization that she does want it, but does she really want it? This episode seems to move so quickly between where we're going. I've never seen a Game of Thrones episode do it so much, where 1 second we're here, the next second we're there, the next second we're there, and suddenly we're in King's Landing. I don't know how that happened, but we're with Davros, and then we're with Tyrion, and they're in King's Landing. I don't know what the timeline is and how long it's taking characters to get from A to B, but everybody just seems to be moving at such pace. Maybe that's the way the episodes are, because we haven't got as many episodes as our normal 10 episodes per season, but it just seems to be moving at such a pace. It's not a bad thing, because some people prefer it to obviously move quicker, and obviously we've got past some of the slow stuff and we're getting towards the end of the series, so maybe they need to move things quicker. But this felt at such a pace, this episode, it really did. And again, the level of characters meeting up with and reunions, I've never seen anything like it in this episode. I should say. Tyrion meeting up with Jaime, and yeah, there's just so much. And obviously when that scene happens as well, and Jaime's just like, I should just cut you in half, and Tyrion's like, you won't cut me with that little, with that training blade, calm down. That was quite funny. So it's just good, but there's still that love for, between the brothers, and obviously they understand that the game has changed. It's not about them anymore. It's about the upcoming war with the dead. So Tyrion tries to make a bargain with his brother to say that they want to prove that the army of the dead exist, and prove to Cersei that they all need to band together, and that this war is bigger than Daenerys, it's bigger than Cersei, it's bigger than all of them, it's bigger than Jon. They all need to come together. And then we get to Gendry, who's not actually rowing as most of us thought for the past 5 seasons or whatever it's been. He's been just rowing, and Davros even makes a little joke about it himself, so that's a lovely little in-joke to say you're not rowing. And he looks, obviously, where else do we find him but back where we left him? Nobody saw that coming. I didn't see that's where he would be. I thought he'd be somewhere across the sea, but obviously this is where we find him, and it's not bad. It's obviously cool. I like the fact that he doesn't use a sword, he uses an axe. The fact that he makes swords but doesn't actually know how to use one, but he's ferocious, absolutely ferocious with his axe. And there's a scene that plays out later on where he just kills these 2 soldiers. He actually just smashes their heads in to save Tyrion, and because Tyrion's obviously a little dwarf and is not hard to miss. So that was an interesting scene as well, and it's just ferocious. He's like a character who's just not got time to wait, Gendry, and it's really cool to see him in this episode. It's really cool. Basically, we obviously go back to Cersei as well, who reveals that she's pregnant out of nowhere. Now, I don't know if I believe that myself. She's saying she's pregnant, but is she? We'll have to wait and see with that. And Jaime being Jaime, who just loves her to bits. He can't see anything wrong with her. He refuses to see that there's a problem with her, or that she might be lying. He doesn't want to believe it. And she gives this look as well of, and says, don't ever try and deceive me again. And it's true Cersei. I don't know if to believe her. Maybe she's pregnant, maybe she's not. We'll have to wait and see. But the deceitful nature of this character just reveals itself at every turn. So who knows? We'll have to wait and see. It was cool having Gendry meet Jon Snow for the first time, and obviously talk about their shared history between their fathers, quote, Robert Baratheon and obviously Ned Stark. But we all know the Ned Stark lineage with Jon Snow. But it's still cool for them to obviously still have that kindredship and talk about their fathers. Say what you will about Jon Snow's parentage, but it is Ned Stark who raised him as his son. So say what you will, by all accounts, I would still say Jon Snow is the son of Ned Stark. So for the two characters to come together, it was really nice and quite touching for them to kind of acknowledge that their fathers were best friends and kind of just have that, as I said, that kindredship. You know what I mean? It's nice. And maybe there's something that comes out of that. Maybe he has to save him at some point. We don't know, but it's nice to see that scene. And then obviously they have to leave because obviously the news has came to Jon Snow from Bran that the enemy is moving. So they need, as I said earlier, they need to prove that the dead are real. And Daenerys seems to have fell, at least it appears anyway from this, as I said earlier, she seems to have really fell for Jon Snow. And the look she gives him when he has to leave, it's like somebody in love having to kind of part with the person they love. Now, I don't think Jon sees her that way. I think he likes her, but obviously I don't think it's the same level. Yeah, obviously he does like her, but I don't think it's the way she likes him. And maybe there might be more to that at some point as well. Jorah also goes as well on behalf of Daenerys, so that will be interesting as well. And she gives that look watching the boats leave and thinking, maybe it might be the last time that some of these characters are seen together. Some of them don't make it back, who knows. But then there's this other cool thing that happens where Gilly, of all people, it's Gilly who seems to unravel one of the mysteries that most people in Westeros haven't figured out: the parentage of Jon Snow. Now, maybe more will play out with that, but Sam just seemed to be so oblivious to the fact that she was telling him all of this useful information. He just didn't want to know. He was ranting about having to take all of these scrolls that just talk about all this dumb stuff, and he just wasn't listening to the most important stuff. And maybe it might just click in his brain at some point and go, hang on a minute, she was saying what? But we'll have to wait and see with that as well. Again, we come back to Winterfell and we see that Arya is being a little bit sneaky, and she's watching Littlefinger. She's got her eye on him. She doesn't trust him, and she's kind of right to not trust Littlefinger. Littlefinger was ultimately one of the people behind her father's murder, and his influence in Winterfell is noticed. The people he's talking to, the things that he does, the little bit of money that he gives to characters, it's not unrecognized by Arya as well. And she watches him, follows him, sees what he does, sees that he gets a note, sneaks into his room, opens the note and reads, from what it appears to be anyway, maybe a suicide note for Sansa. Maybe I might have got that completely wrong. I don't know. Or is it a note to say that as it appears? I'm not even sure. I don't really want to speculate, but maybe it's something. It's obviously of great importance, but I'm not entirely sure what it is at this point. I don't really want to speculate too much, but I'm sure we'll have a bigger reveal on what's actually going on there. But this is like a little subplot, and I'm actually interested in what's going on here. And then we see that Littlefinger, as much as Arya is watching Littlefinger, somebody like Littlefinger is always 2 steps ahead and is actually watching Arya. So that's really cool to watch and see as well, and see how this will play out, the whole thing, with Sansa included. So that's cool. And then we go back to see that Jon Snow has now ended up at the wall. As I'm saying, this episode seems to move at such pace. There's so many things happening. We go from King's Landing all the way up to the wall in one episode. It's crazy. Especially Davros. Davros seems to be in every scene, and he's moved around so much. I really do want to know how quickly they're moving around and how the timeline seems to be working. And then we get to a point where we see that the brothers are in prison with the Hound, and then all of these characters who at some point have got shared history and don't get on with each other. Gendry was sold and killed to the Red Woman, and then we see that Jorah doesn't like other characters, the Wildlings, and there's all this shared history, and everyone doesn't like everyone, and all of these characters are there for one mission. It kind of feels like if you could look at it like this, it kind of looks like the Magnificent Seven. They're all there for a purpose. Maybe not all of these characters are going to make it back, but it's really interesting to see that they've now wrapped themselves up together. They have to work as a team because they're going beyond the wall. Jon Snow's leading the team, and maybe he's got to bring all of these desperate characters together, the characters who just haven't ever got on and now relying on each other to kind of have to figure it out and kind of bring back one of these dead people and prove to the world that something really big is actually happening. I love this episode. I think it was so cool. There's so many cool elements to what's happening here, and I can't wait to see where it's going to go. I really can't. You know, the next episode is just going to be really cool to see where all of these characters and how they've got to get on and what they've got to do together. I can't wait. Give me your thoughts, guys, because I just thought this episode was just something else. Not that it had overabundance of action, but it's the deeper elements and the things that they're setting up that make this an important and interesting episode. So give me your thoughts. Let me know what you guys think. I can't wait to see where it's going to go, but I think it was a great episode. Solid. Let's see what happens.